Okay, so continuing on from the previous list that was a summary, there's going to be some real things for you to consider and decisions you have to make that we're referring to as forks in the road as you go through the process that we just discussed. And one of the things on the negotiation, we're talking about terms. We talk about we use the term price, but Bill, is it really all about money when you're talking about price?
Well,
Whoops.
it's not, because part of price, if you think about it, it's not just cash, but if your company has a lot of debt, that reduces how many dollars you're going to get in your pocket. Or if you have a lot of cash on your balance sheet, well, if you sell the business, you're selling that cash too. And it has a value, obviously. So you want to go ahead and you really do need to understand what it is you're selling. So who's assuming the liabilities involved in it? Who's assuming the equity? If you have your real estate that you own part of the company, like your building, well, that has a different effect than other parts. You might want to keep the real estate so that you can get some rental income from that in your retirement days. Rental from the company you just sold, perhaps. And there's lots of ways to think about this, but that's just from the money standpoint, or just from the purchase price standpoint. You could want to sell the stock or assets. If you sell the stock, that has a tax effect. If you sell assets, that is a different effect. And that's why you need these outside advisors to give you help with that. They also help in negotiations as well. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not good. But my point is that there's a lot of things to consider when you're going through it all. And we had to consider all that.
Well, I'm sure it was a big education for you. And, buyers, their offers are not always going to be it for stock or cash, or for assets. It's not always going to be cash either.
Yeah.
And if you're not even selling that way, if you're trying to, you'd mentioned earlier about trying to sell to employees, this bubble down here that talks about subordinated seller notes. I think you and I both have had friends where within PMA that have sold their business, and they were effectively seller financing the business.
Yeah.
And things did not go well, and they got the business back in a diminished state. So there's many different. This is a very complex issue, and it's definitely one that this is why the advisors are so important as you evaluate competing offers, because one offer may look really good on the surface, but the devil's in the detail. And it may not make sense for you after you look at the kind of risk you're retaining going forward. It may not be right for you as a seller with respect to the tax situation that it puts you in. Again, there may be off-balance sheet things like the value you place, as you alluded to, the value you place on having a long-term lease on that building that you still own with the company that you sold it to.
Right.
So there's a lot of things to consider here when you talk about purchase price.
Right.
And Bill, and looking at these details, one of the really important things that really for the buyer and the seller is going to be getting this point determined pretty early on. And so if you could, just take us through your experience with the sale of Termax on, what the buyer was trying to accomplish and what you all as the seller were trying to accomplish, and where you ended up at with respect to an asset or a stock transaction.
Well, a buyer, they're going to spend all these dollars here, and they want to go ahead and have something that they can depreciate. Mm-hmm. So if they put all this money out they want to be able to write it off and reduce their income taxes going forward on that money. So they can't do that when it's a stock sale. So what happens is that stock itself is not deductible. And it's like buying stock in General Motors. You can buy stock in that, but you only get to, when you sell it again someday, that it'll be what you paid for it would be subtracted for what you sell it for, and that's your capital gain. Well, and that's how a stock sale would work here too. Assets, however, they have something that is depreciable. So those items, that the things that they sell or have bought from you can be then depreciated. It's in their best interest to do that. Now, why do you care? Because your tax treatment as the seller changes based on how you sell these things. So if you sell it as stock, the stock of the company, then all of the underlying assets are just part of that transaction. But if you sell it as assets, then you could end up paying a different tax rate. That's why you have to have good advisors. Let's just leave it easy. You need to have good advisors that can walk you through all of that stuff. And it's really important. There are tax benefits and tax costs in any transaction that you have here. And it's important to have those thought through way before you actually sign the papers. Because if you wait till the end, or if you haven't thought it through, it could cost you a lot more money.
Well, and frankly, it's having those advisors are extremely important, especially the tax advisors, because again, we said the purchase price is not the purchase price. You got to look at all the way down to what the tax benefits or the tax consequences are, and either enhancing or detracting from the purchase price that you got, so that when you decide yes or no, am I going to sell at what was offered to you, you really need to understand what you're going to get net of all these considerations.
Well, just as an example, let's say you own a car, or the company owns a vehicle, and that you've been driving around for the last 5 years. Well, the problem is that car, there's a bunch of different ways to think about this. One, if you sell the asset of the car with the business, well, you've got a capital gain on the sale there. You might decide you want to keep that car, and that changes the purchase price, but it also changes the tax structure. So you could end up paying taxes on the car by bringing it out of the business into your personal assets. So there's lots of things to think about. That's all. And the problem is, none of us, we're in the business of making parts or manufacturing. We're not in the business of doing these things. I can't stress enough how important it is to get outside advisors.
Yeah. So. Good point. Okay. So a lot of things to consider here. When we were talking about the letter of intent previously, a lot of things that you're going to need to be looking for in that letter of intent. It starts with the terms, the purchase price, and we've touched on some of these already. The purchase price is not just the purchase price. It's how is it being offered? Are they is the buyer asking for seller notes, so for the seller to finance some of that purchase? Are they asking, are you or the buyer asking you to retain some equity for a period of time, where they want to sometimes ensure a smooth transition, which I think was the case with Termax. They wanted you guys to stay there and make sure that this business was still running the way it was running after, before they purchased the business.
Well, they were from France. They trusted me, but on the other hand, I had a vested interest because I wanted to make money.
Yeah. Again, what is the basis of the transaction, stock or asset. Uh, just a lot of things we've touched on here. When do you notify employees? What is going to happen? The exclusivity period. My goodness, if you go through all those steps, and let's say you spend 120 days with the buyers selected, if that had not, if you'd gotten to the end of that at Termax and it didn't work out, would you have had the energy and really the energy to start that process right away with another buyer?
No. Well, if it becomes such a egregious thing, then I might have, but I didn't want to. It's once you get along the path, you find that you either do it or you walk away. But walking away is harder. The longer you're part of these things, the harder it is to walk away from it. So just make sure you know where you are from the start.
You and your advisors really need to spend a lot of time or spend the appropriate amount of time and energy on clarifying things as much as you can.
Right.
In the letter of intent, so there are fewer things that could submarine the transaction from happening, because and that there's no surprises for you as a seller or for the buyer. So if you both work together on that, and they've got good people on their side working, and you've got the right advisors, and you do a good job, because really the goals are aligned. They're wanting to buy you, you're wanting to sell.
Exactly. Now, you've heard of the buyer beware. I think seller beware too. But if you don't do it, it's going the wrong direction as well. So you really want to go ahead and do it, but just know that it's going to take work.
Yeah. All right. So you got to the other end of this process with Termax, and it was like many huge decisions in life. It takes reflection over time, and you finished the sale of Termax in June of last year. You've had time to reflect on this for a number of months. How do you feel about the whole process and where you ended up after you've had some time to reflect?
I think we did a lot of things right and a few things wrong. One of the right things I did, they were the right buyers. They continued on the legacy that we had created. Obviously we got enough money, so I'm not too worried about that. I was involved for 3 years after the original sale. And I think I would have changed how that worked out. I probably would have either sold the whole thing up front, or it was difficult for me because I hadn't had a boss before. And now I have a boss. And frankly, having a boss it's different. I can't just come and go when I want to, or make decisions that I want to make. I have to rely on not only my employees, but my bosses to go ahead and on those same things. So it just takes, I think we did the right thing by the company standpoint. I'm not sure I did the right thing by my standpoint. We got plenty of money, but I probably would have left earlier.
Right. Well, Bill, thank you very much for sharing about your experience, and sort of circling back to the beginning. We said, you have to make that, the first part of the process is you have to make the decision to sell.
Yep.
And I think there is a lot to unpack around that topic, especially for privately held businesses where, you like you just said, you have not had a boss for how many years?
Right, 20 some years.
Yeah, and you hadn't had that, and that's the way these businesses, the privately held businesses are, and the business is really a big part of your identity. And I'd like to talk to you in the future about, that topic. It's not only just getting your business prepared to sell and making that decision, but what you had to do in your personal life for this humongous transition of, hi, I'm Bill Smith, the president and owner of Termax. I'm not anymore.
Yeah, I'm Bill Smith.
So, and I think there's a lot that our listeners would like to hear on that, because I think that's a really interesting topic.
Okay, I'll do what I can.
All right. Thank you so much, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.